Alright, so this is going to be the first in a series that I'm, for my regular viewers, this is for a specific group of people that I'm doing stuff with. But it's good stuff, so I'm going to put it on my main channel. So, I'm going to go over how to make various things in ways ranging from simple to hard. And so, I'm going to start out with spears, right? Spears. I'm going to make a variety of spears in various ways, ranging from simple to hard, and I went over this, so I'm just going to get started. Alright, so, let's assume that you do not have a lovely workshop like this with power tools, and even a welder in the back. Well, you want to make a spear, how do you do it? There's a couple of ways. If you have little bits of scrap metal lying around, you find a pointy-ish one. Hopefully you have a file. Alright, so long ago, I did not have access to all these power tools, and what I used was a file. So, I would take you can do stuff without metal. You can do it with stone. Stone is much less durable, much harder to work with. I wasn't really doing it with metal at the time, but you can do it with metal. And actually my first stuff with metal I did like this. You take here's a lovely little bit of metal. This is going to be a knife, so I'm not going to actually mess it up. You take this and you just start filing. Start filing. If you have a metal saw, you can use a metal saw to cut out the basic shape. Other than that, you just file away. This is extremely time intensive, waste material, but it works. And because it works, you can do it. So that's one of the simplest ways. I'm not going to go into that, because A, it's time intensive, and B, pretty simple. Another pretty simple way is you take something like this. This is a worthless knife. It's like a barely I'd barely call it a steak knife. It's like nothing, but it'll stab. If it's all you got, you can do this. Alrighty, so this is some Tarzan level stuff. You take some rope, which everyone should have anyway. You take a relatively straight stick of whatever length you want, but for this I'd say just throw it. I wouldn't try to make this into like a handheld fighting spear or anything. I'd say just chuck it at whatever you're chucking it at and go with it like that. And you take a knife, and it's pretty simple. If you can't figure out what I'm going to do by now, you need more help than I can give. But I'm demonstrating it anyway because I'm going to take it out after I finish all of these, and I'm going to throw it at stuff and test it. Alrighty, so take the heavy end, you tie the knife to the heavy end, because this is a projectile weapon. If it were not a projectile weapon, we would be tying it to the light end for increased celerity. And you tie it on, but you can't just tie it on. I'm going to move closer in a bit to show this better. And this rope, by the way, this has been sitting out. This is not very good rope. Alrighty, so you take it, and you notice I'm doing this all with my hand. I'm not using that lovely bench vise I've got there. And you lash it to the rope. So you make a couple of twists, not twists, you go around a couple of times, right? And then you pull it tight. Now, every once in a while, you do this. See what I did there? You put it over your finger. And this is also by no means the most easy way of doing this. You put it around. And yeah, this is a big disconnected mess of things. This should be a nice tight roll. Now things will be very confusing because it's a big confusing mess here. But if you could make sense of that, then you do that. And you keep wrapping. And every once in a while you put one of those in. This is a vastly easier way of doing it. What I did there, you leave a really, really big loop. Basically you pass the other end of it under a loop like that. You pass it through, up and through, and then you tie it like this. Pull back, pull forward, pull back, pull forward, you rock it in. This is already very, very insecure. This is not at all secure. But again, this is the Ooga Booga Tarzan way of doing things. All right, make big loop, pass through loop. All right, now I'm going to take out my secondary knife and cut this off. This is like, I mean, if you've seen this TV show Dad's Army, they do this in Dad's Army. This is like the most, if you don't know what that is, then you will have absolutely no clue what I'm talking about. But if you know, you know. And I'm going to leave it at that because I don't want to go into that. That's not what I'm doing here. This is like the absolute easiest way to make a spear. Take vaguely pointy thing, tie to end of stick with point roughly in line with shaft. Now you notice it's off center. That's terrible, but it allows us to just untie this and take the knife off and have a knife and a stick and rope. All of the components here are, I can repurpose them. All right, so you just take this, you throw it at stuff. Simple, spear. All right, now we are moving on. We're still kind of in Tarzan territory, but we're moving on from there. All right, so I'm gonna start with this. This, you will notice I now have much smaller rope. And what I've done is I've taken a pointy, thin bit of metal, I've cut a groove in the spear, I've shoved that in, and I've tied around it. This is a terrible one because actually this blade is supposed to be more like that. You notice the blade went in. That's because I made this terribly. It's not well made. A while back, I reckon that had maybe 3 more throws in it before it breaks. But it took me, I don't know how long, not very long to make that. It was easy. Then we got this. This is roughly the same thing, but with several improvements. All right, so you see I got a longer blade, right? And what you can't see in here, because it's covered over by this, I put a pin through here. So I drilled a hole in this at the base, and I put a pin through it, right? Then I duct taped it, and I tied this rope over it. Now this is also on a thicker shaft, and it's got a pin, and the blade doesn't move from side to side. It isn't pushing in. It's kind of pointy. It's an ugly thing. It's not very aesthetically pleasing. but it works, and it is strong enough I can hold it in my hand and stab stuff with it. I'll demonstrate that later, right? So I can throw it, or I can hold it in my hands and stab stuff. And it's light enough I can have a shield or something else here. I can do it with one hand, right? So this is a significant improvement. This, I made it as a javelin. I didn't really care about anything. It's just a really, really thin piece of birch. Blade barely in there, enough that it'll stay in if I throw it at something, but I don't really care about it beyond when it is thrown at something. That's it. Now, we're getting into harder stuff. So, this is still technologically the same as that right there. Actually, it's the same as that right there. These are not pinned. They are much longer. These are longer, these are sturdier, these are meant to be held in the hands, manipulated, and there's something, basically, these are fighting weapons that aren't meant to be just thrown and forgotten about. So it's still kind of pointy thing on the end of a long stick. The stick is longer. This still isn't pinned, but it's very, very sturdy for some reason. I don't know why. And it's tied. It's like nothing. But the wood, you have to know wood. This is sturdy wood. And this blade is much harder to make. This is an ugly one. I messed up on this. What I should do is I should cut it so that it's more spear-like. I was going for a leaf spearhead, but it didn't work. This one is actually very good. It is still the same. It is not pinned, but this has stood up to significant stress. Now, if you can get a piece of angle iron, this is the good stuff. If you can get a piece of angle iron, you see this ridge here. Now, back in the day, if you were making something like a sword, you would want, well, sometimes they put a fuller in them, and on some very rare, mainly stabbing things, they'd put a ridge on them. They would intentionally put that in there. Now, this is just a piece of angle iron that I pounded flat on a rock. I used a rock at this point. I didn't have an anvil. I used a rock. You notice it's roughly flat. It'll stab something. I have repeatedly tested this. It's sturdy. It's got a longer tang, but I didn't even tie around all the tang. Now what the tang was is it just keeps going, and I cut some notches in it to make it catch the string better, so it works. This is still technologically the same as this, but it's a sturdier form of it. All right, now we got most advanced. This is the most advanced so far. This is actually a plumbing harpoon. It is not meant to be a fighting spear. I got a comment from someone, if you're watching the video, hi, that was saying, but Keegan, what kind of fish are you going to be able to spear with that harpoon? Well, firstly, this would be like a whaling harpoon. I do not whale. You'll notice it is flat. This is not a good example. My actual spear is in the house, but I made it with the same techniques as I used to make my actual spear. So educationally, it's exactly the same. So, now we have access to a workshop. We have access to welding. Previously, as I mentioned, I banged that flat on a rock. All I had was a hammer. I think I had an angle grinder. But you could get functionally the same result with pointy piece of metal. Wouldn't look as good, would work slightly less well, but you could do it. You get a pointy piece of metal, you get a strong stick, you have to have a saw. You could do it with a file. It would take a long time, but you could do it with a file. Now this, I made this to clean out a culvert. It is welded. I bent a piece of metal like this, drilled 2 holes through it, ran bolts through, bolted it together. You notice I didn't even cut these off. I'm leaving it that way because if this breaks, I can unscrew those bolts. I've got the head, I've got the bolts. I can, maybe I just cut it off, put it down here, or I get a whole new stick. If I get a stick that fits here, it works. All I need is a wrench and a drill, and I can reattach this to anything I want in the field. All I need is a wrench and a drill. So it's welded on, and this is very sturdy. You see, like the medieval ones, they make a sort of a kind of a conical tube that you put over it a lot of the time. I just go with flanges. They have functionally the same effect. It works. If I didn't know this were very sturdy, you would want this to be touching. You wouldn't want it to be like you see the big gap there. You would want this to be touching this. Because right now, if I put pressure on this, all of the pressure is going on these bolts and by extension into the wood right there. Ideally, I would want all the pressure to be going right there, like that. But it works the same. So this is vastly more advanced than those. And it's vastly more durable. Alrighty, I was expecting I would actually be making these, but now that I think about it, I don't need to. I've got examples right here, and you can probably see fairly well. If you want more detail, I can either make a video in which I actually do make one, or make them, or I'm pretty sure I have older videos of me making those ones you had that you saw there. Anyway, now we get to the important bit. Let's test them. I mean, well, the important bit was knowing how to make the things, but now you see how they perform. Alrighty, let's do that. Knife tied to a stick, try 2. Well, I did it. It's not exactly. Yeah, as I suspected, this is not a very good spear. But, look at that. Now it is back to being as good as it was before, which wasn't very good. But let's see if it'll... Yeah, okay, so that's terrible. Yeah. I don't know, I think it hit and just didn't penetrate or do anything at all. Yeah, so that's completely useless. But I can still use all of these pieces. I have made ones. I think it's just this knife is terrible. I have made ones that have passed my tree test, which is I whack the tree with them and see if they function, and they have worked. This particular one is pretty terrible and does not, and I wasn't expecting it to. So I will now move on. Alright, so this is my earliest attempt at a javelin, and I will see if it works on this. I know it will because I've tested it. It's not terribly good. It penetrated, it did stuff, but as you notice, the blade's gone in again. I'm just going to leave it there because it's going to go into that spot anyway. That's as much as it's going to penetrate. It's not very good at all. But this was my first attempt at javelin. I'm going to throw it again. That's better. It does go in. It does stick. Sticking isn't terribly important, but it kind of shows that it penetrated. And that's that. Now, this one. This one I know is good. I'm going to throw it at it, and I'm going to stab. So here goes. Yep. Straight in. Glorious. All right, so it's gone in a good bit. Not sure how easy that is to see. Yeah, so that worked. And yeah. I'm pretty sure I pinned this one. Now this is the real thing, is cleaveraging it out without breaking it. And this is fine. It works. I'm pretty sure I pinned it. I might not have. Wait a second. I actually don't feel any pin. Maybe I didn't pin this. Anyway, it does work. And now I will stab the tree with it. You can see I put my weight into that. And it's fine. The spear is still completely fine as it was before, and it works. So, let's get on to the other ones. Alrighty, so this is a longer spear, and it's meant for, it's not meant for throwing. I can throw it, I have done that. It holds up. That's not what I'm gonna do here. It looks crooked a bit, but it actually, the overall thing is it's not crooked. It's just at the end there's a crooked bit, and it corrects it. It works. Weirdly enough, it works. And I can even do stuff like, let's see, I can hack with it even, with no negative effects. So, I will stab. Alrighty. That was a full-on stab. And it is broken. It is bent. Now, I can do that. And it's about as good as new. But it did, in fact, bend a disturbing amount there. And actually, there's a little bend at the tip there. That's not good. I was not expecting that to happen because it has passed that test before. I've done that before. Maybe I hit harder this time? I don't know. So this, well, it succeeded before, it has failed now. But like, I just did all that. And that was, you know, fast stabbing. And it didn't get damaged again. And perhaps the most important bit, okay, it's shifted a little bit here. Oh, no, really. Like, the thing that would actually worry me is not if the blade gets bent a little. It's if the connection here shifted around it any bit. Like if this had gone like that, or if it had gone in or out, that would worry me. The connection's good, and I can just keep fixing the blade if I have to. So now, the most advanced, and I'm not going to do it on that tree because it would be too destructive. Alrighty, so this is not actually meant for this, but it demonstrates the thing. And let me just spoil it for you. Nothing I do to this is going to damage it in any way. I can't. I've been using this. I've used this like a crowbar, and it doesn't break. I have quite literally, like, stabbed this into stuff and levered it. Doesn't break. The hooks have never broken. It all works Because again, this is a plumbing thing, so this stands up to regular abuse. I've been using this to clean out a culvert. I stab it in, I pull it out, I stab it in, I pull it out. I use it to lever stuff. It's all fine. But I will demonstrate. Perfectly fine. Fine. Still fine, and this isn't even sharpened. I've just ground an angle that way. It's not sharpened at all. And this works. So if you've got a workshop, you can make something as good as this. If you don't, well, you've seen the previous results. They're not as good, but they still work. Especially if all you're doing is throwing it at the target and not expecting to have to use it at any point beyond that. It works.